So the first question, does it penetrate enemies now? Well, it doesn't look like it. Let's see those examples. I've already explained how it worked before in Season 3 and in the first 2 iterations of Season 4, so now it's time to review the limited edition of PBM. Let's see what happened to the OnPenetrated event. First of all, maximum impacts now gets checked right at the gate instead of later somewhere down the line. However, you might remember that should penetrate property is literally the same condition, except it gets assigned in the end, after passing through if it gets a bug condition. So that might be excessive, and that's why it wasn't here in the first place. Later, we will see how well it works in one of the examples. If this condition is true, then you remember it just does damage through armor, and often for free, and when it was sliding on the ground, constantly triggering this event for not accounting area damage ticks. That was really terrifying, for the bugs I mean. But not anymore. Now it has 1/10 of a second cooldown that prevents it from damaging too often. Moreover, since it was straight ignoring armor, now it learned how to damage it directly. Before it could only be damaged with area damage ticks. And if it does damage to anything, whether it's ground or a creature, maximum impacts, which is a base counter and a limit of how many times PBM deals damage, it gets decremented. For the limiter to actually work, it now only checks if the left amount of hits is not 0, and if 0.1 seconds have passed since the last hit. Whereas before it was reducing maximum impacts only when it was hitting creatures. Pawn means an entity or an eye in the game, here it basically means creatures. Now, the only time when it's not going to reduce maximum impacts while executing OnPenetrated event is when it's on its own cooldown, but in this case it won't do any damage either. And the bottom part of this event hasn't got any changes except maximum impact doesn't get reduced in the end, since it gets checked and reduced in the upper part now. Basically what's happening here is that if it hits a creature then it checks whether it's allowed to further penetrate, although it never really penetrates, and it gets permission to bounce for the next second, and that is actually important. Also, target creature gets ignored for a second, so misses take longer I guess, but not triggering back onto target immediately. You can see the whole OnPenetrated event here, I think, and let's move to the next event, which is OnBounce event. What's new here is that it now only does damage when it bounces off creatures. However, now it can do not only area damage but also direct damage to creatures. It's actually the same kind of call as in OnPenetrated event, so you can definitely tell that it ignores armor, although it doesn't damage it directly unlike what we saw in OnPenetrated event. And at last it now accounts this damage by decrementing maximum impacts in the end. Before it could do only area damage, but it could do it for free when it was bouncing off terrain. Another thing to notice is that time of loss bounce can be assigned of any type of bounce, including terrain bounces. In that case it surely won't do any damage, but not only that, it will block OnBounce damage of creature bounces for the next half a second. So you will actually lose damage by letting bounce off terrain when maximum impacts will be equal to 0. I'll show that bit later in examples. On impacted events, it gets called by upon missile destruction, remained unchanged. It simply does the last hit damage which direct part can be blocked by armor, however there is still some mystery with it. It can be suddenly called before missile ends with 5 penetrations or bounces, thus cancelling all the following damage. In the last video, I questioned once, in one of the demonstrations, why one of the missiles got destroyed, when it still was allowed to bounce further, and that is a real mystery to me. So let's see what's happening here. Maximum impact equals 7 by default. It limits how many times rocket can deal damage. So how many times rocket can deal damage hits to target from both OnPenetrated event and OnBounce event now. Because you remember it checks OnPenetrated event in the beginning, and it reduced, and OnPenetrated event reduces max impacts right after dealing damage now. And OnBounce event now also reduces maximum impacts, so this thing serves as a general limiter for 2 events now. Time of last bounce, this thing gets reassigned by OnBounce event, so when you see number here, that means that OnBounce event is on 0.5 second cooldown now, and if it hits creature, when should penetrate falls, it deals damage here. So the condition for OnBounce event to do damage, this thing should be false. This thing should be not on cooldown, not on 0.5 second cooldown. So like the interval should be greater than 0.5 second here. And then it will deal damage of creature. It can't deal damage of ground anymore. So let's see what's happening here. Time of last hit. Time of last hit. It is the property, the new property of OnPenetrated event that measures its cooldown, 0.1 second cooldown. Like this thing measures 0.5 second cooldown here, but here it's only tenths of a second. And when it pops up, it tells us that OnPenetrated event deals damage here. Like, let's see. See, it popped up, damage here, max impulse got reduced. Should penetrate is true. And now should bounce is also true. So because of that property, it now didn't penetrate, but it actually bounced off creature. Just because of these properties that gets assigned at the end of OnPenetrated event. Second time. 1, 2, 1, 2. And see now it touched terrain, but that thing didn't do damage because 0.1 second cooldown haven't passed yet. It's on cooldown on penetrated event, but on bounce event it is allowed to reset its cooldown from ground hits, but it doesn't do damage of ground hits anymore. Let's continue. It hits the leg. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. On penetrated event deals damage 3 times already. 4 times. And 5th time. 5th time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It dealt damage of the ground on penetrated event. It is allowed to do that. See, 9 damage. It was very close to the leg. That's why it's not like less. You would expect area damage to be actually less than this normally. You would like 5 or 6 damage, I guess. But 9, yeah, 9 is kinda a lot. Let's see what happens further. Here, it actually deals something. But you see no damage here. That's because the 0.1 second cooldown haven't passed yet. And that's why it only spawns explosion effects, explosion visual effects, as you saw in the scheme. Then it flies around, and moment here, one tick of OnPenetrated event. Here, the 6th tick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we got 2 ticks at once on the 7th time. 1, 2. That's because the 7th time OnPenetrated event got executed. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th time for OnPenetrated event. 7th time max impulse got decreased. Should penetrate became false. And the moment it became false, OnBounce event is allowed to run itself off creature bounties. When this false and this is true, OnBounce event is now allowed to do damage of creatures. You see? Now it got reassigned, it is on cooldown now, and it dealt damage. It dealt direct and area damage. That damage goes through armor, like in OnPenetrated event. And there was no direct damage in the previous build, but now there is. Yeah, and it does damage armor, by the way. It only damages the target, unlike OnPenetrated event. And this thing now is on 0.5 second cooldown. And we also see that max point impact got reduced by 1. As we remember, it gets reduced every time. So I don't know for what reason, because OnPenetrated event still won't be ran, because this thing is less than 0, and this thing is false. So like there is two conditions that prevents this from running. That prevents OnPenetrated event from doing damage now, but still it gets reduced into negative numbers, which is pretty funny. Let's wait for it. OnPenetrated, OnBounce event deals damage second time because cooldown expired. However, will it be able to do damage third time? No. Should bounce becomes false because 1 second that got assigned at the end of the last OnPenetrated event already expired. Thus, it dealt damage only 2 times. And the only event that can deal damage now is OnImpacted event that destroys the rocket upon impact. See, rocket got destroyed. And that OnImpacted event actually accounts armor on direct hits. 20% of direct damage got blocked by light armor that is somewhere here, I guess. Yeah, and so we got 10 hits in total, 7 from OnPenetrated event, then should penetrate became false, and OnBounce event then dealt 2 hits, so 7 plus 2 now, and then at last OnImpacted event dealt the last hit, so it's now 7 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10 total damage hits. So let's see what's happening here. The rocket flies to bulk detonator, hits it for the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, and now attention, it hits it for the second time, but with area damage now. So far, 0.1 second cooldown, kinda guarded it from Tyrion hits, so it dealt direct damage every time, but now it didn't protect it from area damage, from wasting max spawn impacts on area damage. It dealt area damage here. As a result, max spawn impacts became 0. However, should penetrate is still true, because that thing is at the bottom of the scheme, is at the bottom of OnPenetrated event, and it is under if it hit a pawn condition. Only when it hits a creature can it become false. Hits a creature, it becomes false. However, is there damage? Is there additional free damage we asked for? No, there is no damage. But max spawn impulse got reduced without damage. Earlier we also see that OnBounce went on cooldown of this ground bounce. That's why on that kind of 7th hit we get no damage at all. So OnPenetrated damage was here, and OnBounce damage will be later because it's now on cooldown. Now we have 1 second of bounce time, and that is more than enough for 2 hits from this event with 0.5 second cooldown between them. So let's wait for it. This is the first time here. Again, it got reduced because it now gets reduced for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know what purpose it serves, but for whatever reason it gets reduced when running OnBounce event. I guess it's like a failsafe that developers wanted to have it, but yeah, I don't see like a reason for it yet. There will be one more hit, by the way. Here, OnBounce event dealt its second damage tick. 1, 2. These were only crowned bounces that reset that cooldown, that dealt no damage. This 1, 2, 1, 2. That was without damage, you remember? And now it doesn't have time for the third tick because should bounce becomes false. 1 second expired. And at last, OnImpacted event destroys the rocket with its final damage. It's still 10 damage hits in total. Let's see what's happening here. That's like kind of different kind of example. So it hits a Praetorian 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 3 times I said? Yes, 3 times. Kinda slice it under it, under him. And now, you see that moment? That moment was so overpowered in the previous build. It would dealt like enormous amount of damage. Like absolutely like demolished. It would absolutely vaporize Praetorian when it was sliding on the ground instead of bouncing. So as a result we get 3 area damage ticks of OnPenetrated event. However, it is all on 0.1 second cooldown. Here 0.1 second, 0.1 second. So the damage per second is limited, and it all gets accounted by max point impacts reductions. So DPS is limited, total damage is limited, so that moment is no longer overpowered. In fact, it's actually harmful for us. Let's see why. The final tick was of the leg. Max point impacts became 0. Should penetrate became false, but there is no damage of OnBounce event because it's still on cooldown. The difference between this number and this number is less than 0.5 seconds, which is OnBounce cooldown. OnBounce will be later. Here, OnBounce event happened. However, it was off terrain and can deal damage off terrain. Remember? It only deals damage of creature bounties. Thus, we kinda lost damage now. Let's wait for the cooldown. Again, it went on cooldown of ground hit, and again we got no damage. The tyrant hits do no damage. Maximal impacts doesn't go into negative numbers because of that, because there is simply no damage from OnBounce event, because we kinda reject that damage by aiming at the ground. Before that kind of movement, when max spawn impacts is not yet 0, that kind of movement before was omega overpowered, but now it is really countered. Here by cooldown, and here by max spawn impacts being somewhere at the top, being reduced at the top right after dealing damage. So in fact, just when this becomes false, should bounce false. Yes, we do get unimpacted damage here. It hits directly Praetorian somewhere in the S, I guess. But we didn't get any OnBounce damage ticks. Max point impacts is 0, although it could go negative, but we kinda lost the damage. So in total we only got 8 damage hits. 7 from OnPenetrated event and 1 from OnImpacted and 0 from OnBounce event.